Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode from the EmbellishPod. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists, and if you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com, and I'll get that taken care of. You can also find video versions of this podcast on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at EmbellishPod or TikTok with the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's a place to pick up these links, episode details, and more. Today, I'm going to have Connor joining me from McTavish, and Connor and I started podcasting about the same time, and he took a short break from podcasting to begin a whole brand. I hope you guys enjoy this conversation. I have a feeling this is the first of many conversations about what they have going on. This morning, this afternoon, this evening, whenever you happen to be consuming this, I have Connor Gilbert joining me of McTavish Spirits, formerly of Who Gives a Dram and other podcasts. Connor, thank you for hopping on with me. I want to talk a little bit about McTavish here in a second, but just kind of tell us who you are for the people that should probably know, because we started about the same time. So the odds are we have the same audience, but if they don't know who you are you?
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier today. I was like, I think John and I started Who Gives a Dram in October 2020, and you must have started right around the same time. And this is the first time we've actually ever chatted with one another, but we've been in communication for over half a decade, probably,
Right.
just about, which is crazy to seem. But we've both been podcasting for a very long time, and now I did take a break for a bit as I've been building McTavish Spirits, but I'm getting back into it with Who Gives a Dram.
Yep.
And really enjoying that. But my name's Connor Gilbert. I co-founded McTavish Spirits with Graham McTavish in August 2023, and I came up through the podcasting route. I did Who Gives a Dram. I did a few other podcasts, and was able to meet a lot of people and was able to experience a lot of cool things, grow my whiskey knowledge, and just continue to feed on the obsession that is whiskey, which is the same for both of us. So it just happened to lead me to McTavish Spirits, and that's where we're at now. So that's a very different path to get there. I never, I didn't finish college. I don't have a business degree. I'm not coming from another business thing. Just kind of fell into my lap, and now I'm doing it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna step on a little bit of that. I don't think it fell into your lap, right? You did a whole lot of work that kind of led to this. You just maybe the stars aligned, but this didn't come with a lot of work. You're not the first podcast to whiskey brand, but in this timetable and in this way, it is very unique in the fact that you've got the folks like Bourbon Pursuit who did a whiskey podcast for like a whole bunch of years, and then they launched a brand eventually. And you've had a few other folks that have kind of lended their name to a brand, but you went through a series of podcasting, and then were able to join yourself with what is, and I hate using the term celebrity brand because that has a connotation to it.
Mm-hmm.
McTavish isn't quite the same way as that, but is there anything, maybe, I guess, if you think about the fact that you came through podcasting to here, is there anything from the podcasting background into what you are that kind of is proven to be valuable as, the CEO, leader, or co-founder of a brand spirit?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I say this all the time, that I look at Pursuit Spirits as a massive inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the guys over there too well, but I look at them the same way as people, two guys that work their asses off podcasting and built a brand. Now, I haven't been podcasting for nearly as long, and nor are any of my podcasts nearly as popular, but it's in the same ballpark, and I have a massive amount of respect. I think they're one of, if not the best, NDPs on the market right now. I have a lot of admiration for both of those guys over there.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer your question, there's a lot of things that translate from the podcasting world to what I do currently, more or less just, leading McTavish Spirits and brand building. I like to think that my job as the leader of McTavish Spirits is to surround myself with people that are much smarter than me in different aspects of business. So I have a financial officer, I have an operations officer, I have people that help me with sales. Obviously, Graham helps with the overall direction of the story, of the brand, of what we want to do. I think where podcasting has helped me is the whiskey knowledge, and not so much. I would imagine that you are much smarter than me when it comes to the history of whiskey and bourbons, and maybe some of the more of the minutia of it. But I feel like I have a really good idea of what works and what doesn't work. And I feel like I can put my finger on the pulse of the whiskey industry and really, you know, figure out what the next step is for McTavish when it comes to the whiskey. Um, Podcasting really helped there because it allowed me to speak to people, all types of different people throughout the industry, from somebody like Brent Elliott at Four Roses to Bruce Buffer, UFC octagon announcer who lends his name to Puncher's Chance Bourbon Whiskey, and everybody in between. I mean, I went to Isla and spoke to distillery managers at Ardbeg and Lagavulin and Bunnahabhain, and I've spoken to people in Australia and Canada and Ireland, like just acting as a sponge and really listening to everybody's point of view, and then being able to at least somewhat use that with what I do now. But I'm always a student of the game. I'm always learning. I think anybody who thinks they know everything is full of crap anyway. So
Mhm.
always a student of whiskey.
Yeah. And I've heard the phrase before: if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room, right? And being able to surround yourself with smart people is a great thing. And in kind of doing the research, I came across, there's the four core tenets of McTavish, which are, honesty, integrity, transparency, and hard work. And being in the work that you do, right? Sometimes it could be it could be really easy to take a shortcut, right? Or to be slightly dishonest or tell us, because brand storytelling is a weird thing, right? Where if you fudge it just a little bit, right, it might help move the needle a little bit quicker. But being in this, those are the four core tenets, and in the industry, how challenging is it to adhere to those values all the time?
It's not challenging at all because that's the way me and Graham are as men. That's how I was raised. I'm 28 years old right now. Graham is in his 60s, 62 or 63. I should probably know that, but I don't. So we're come from much different eras of growing up. But the way I was raised and the way he was raised, those are just how we live. That's how we live our life. And there is an interesting quote that I heard. Well, I heard it a long time ago, but I recently found out who actually said it. I want to say it was maybe Thomas Edison, who said, "I never tell a lie, because if I don't tell a lie, I don't have to remember those lies." Meaning, if
Mhm.
I just always speak the truth, then there's room in my brain for more important things than to remember those lies. So it just goes in terms of it's a super crowded bourbon market or even whiskey market, and everybody knows that. There is that certain celebrity stigma that we openly spar with all the time, and we're happy to do so. And I think that one of the ways we really try to stand out as a brand, and as a small brand, mind you,
Mhm.
is to be authentic. And with that comes trust. With that comes, um, those pillars that I've been saying since the inception of the company. Of this is how we're going to operate.
Mhm.
We're going to do our best to release the highest quality whiskey possible. We're going to be super transparent about it. We're going to be transparent with the price as well. And we're going to do our best to engage with people and just grow. And however long or short that takes, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So um, I I stand by those four tenets because it's just the way that Graham and I live, and the rest of the team as well. Ivy,
Mhm.
Sean, Kale, we all live that way. It's not like it's some type of made up thing. It's just the way that we are naturally.
Yeah, and being in a crowded marketplace as a smaller brand, you have to be brawlers, right? Like it's virtually a fist fight at the store shelf level. And there's been at least kind of watching several brands build. There's a whole lot of things that have to happen so fast, and it puts you in a position where you're gonna have to make decisions really really quickly, and sometimes those decisions aren't super easy.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can think of where it's like, man, this is a tough decision, but ultimately, like, you come out the other side of it, and you're like, it's the right decision, and maybe you could have grown faster if you'd have made that other decision, right?
Oh
Can
yeah.
you?
No, for sure. I mean, there are things that I wish we did different. There are things that I wish we didn't do at all.
Mhm,
And that's just learning. Hindsight's always 2020. One of those difficult decisions was the first release that we ever did.
mhm,
I mean, the War Chief 7-year bottle of the Bourbon whiskey. Um, we could have released something younger for cheaper and kept the same margin or even grown it. Um, to maybe make more money quicker. It all kind of when I first went to Graham with this idea of McTavish Spirits, we asked, you know, there's two ways we can go. We can build this to sell quickly, which as long as we're, kind of transparent
mhm,
like that, there's nothing wrong with that. If we want to just, create something that, the goal is, hey, we have a hard stop in 5 years. We're going to do as much as we can to build it and then we're out. Or we can take the opposite approach, which is what I uh, championed. What it was, let's do this not necessarily the right way, but let's do it the way that we're both kind
mhm,
of accustomed to. Let's get down. Let's do it. Let's do it to grow as a legacy.
right.
And not to say if somebody came around in the next 5 years and offered a boatload of money, that wouldn't be a discussion. But we wanted to create a brand that really stood out in that crowded market, but also stay true to who Graham was, and it just so
Mhm,
happens that I'm very similar to how he is in terms of the way that he thinks. And uh, coming out with the first celebrity bottle of the bond whiskey ever in the War Chief, a 7-year age stated at about $70 per bottle. Maintaining that $10 per
mhm,
aged year structure that again falls into the transparency of pricing. Um, I thought that was the best way for us to show people like yourself. I say whiskey enthusiasts, whiskey connoisseurs, um, that we mean business. Obviously we're not distilling our product. We're not, hands on with the actual, fermentation of the grains or the mashing or anything like that. We're buying whiskey that is already aged or laying down contract distillate in the future and going from there. But we're doing everything else.
mhm.
And I think as long as the transparency is there, the consumer will appreciate that.
Yeah, and I agree completely. And you mentioned kind of the idea of build for legacy or build to sell, and kind of how you move throughout your decision making changes if you do one or the other, and there's nothing wrong with either one of those approaches, right? This is what dot coms did in the tech boom in the 90s. Is they built to sell. That was their whole goal, is they wanted to crank something up, make it as big as they could, give it as many features, and then say, all right, somebody's going to come along and give us whatever. Everything's got a price. If somebody shows up and says,
Oh,
here's like $200 million, you're probably like, well, we'll take $200 million. It is what it is. But
yeah.
you said something in there. I went to Graham, right? So I want to move backwards, maybe just a little bit. So
Mhm.
Graham McTavish is Graham McTavish, and you're Connor Gilbert. How do you end up in a position where you can just say, I went to Graham? Like, how do you meet this guy?
Yeah, well, that has to do with the podcasting. So he was on a former podcast I used to do, and essentially, you know, we were pitched the idea to do this brand, and then I thought, I'd really like to quit my 9 to 5 of tech sales and do this full time as at the time, a 26-year-old. How
Mhm,
cool would that be? I this is the time I can take a chance. I can go without salary for a little bit if I have to. I don't have kids. I'm not married.
mhm,
I don't even have pets. Like I am just laser focused on McTavish, like on my career. At the time, it was trying to build the podcasting slowly. And then I thought, well, if I have this opportunity to build um a brand from the ground up, how can we get to the next level? How can we, move bottles quicker so that way it justifies a full-time position sooner? And I had known Graham was in his words, a closeted bourbon drinker.
Mhm.
So reached out to him just with the idea, hey, I was offered this opportunity to start something based on the podcasting and all these things. How would you feel about joining? It's a very unique situation, and you know, presented some of the details, and he got back super quickly, like in an hour. It was almost kind of weird. It's almost kind of creepy.
Mhm.
And we, me and Graham met the following week, and from there, it just kind of started to formulate, and a lot of things happened. We were going to have somebody that was kind of, you know, I don't want to say backing us, but backing us in a sense. And they pulled out at the last minute. So we had to scramble and figure out how the hell are we going to do this.
Mhm.
And there's been a lot of things that were a lot of wrenches thrown at us that we had to dodge. And I tell when people ask me, what is the McTavish business plan or our business strategy or anything like that, I just say there really is none. We just are. If there is one, it's we roll with the punches, because
Mhm.
it just seems like there's a new punch every single week. And sometimes they're small, but sometimes it's a Mike Tyson, right hook, and it's like, okay, this is something we're gonna have to really, you know, uh, prepare for or change something to make sure that McTavish is as we want it to be. Um, and I'm glad Graham is here for the ride, because he is fully invested. I actually just spoke to him briefly today. Um, he was at Sundance recently. I'm not sure when you're going to release this, but
Mhm.
promoting a new film that he's in, that his friend Doug directed
Mhm.
and produced, and I think created, if I'm not mistaken. But we're going to Alaska at the end of June for the Alaska Highland Games. We're the official bourbon of the Alaska Highland Games, which will see about 40 or 50,000 patrons throughout the weekends. And we
Mhm.
have about three tastings that will do about 300 to 350 people total, that have sold
Mhm.
out in less than a week maybe. So we were talking a little bit about that today, because that's a heavy lift,
Yeah.
flying over to Alaska, and that's a lot. But to weave back to your initial question, that's kind of how the relationship, the business relationship,
Mhm.
formed. And then as we began to work with each other closer and talk more and actually get to know each other, fairly well, that's where a deep seated trust,
Mhm.
formed. And that, Graham and I have been through a lot of shit together. And I have a lot of admiration and respect for that man. And it's because of his vision and his ability to connect with his audience that the Spirits even exists. So it's like I might have provided the idea, and I might provide the roadmap and maybe steer the ship, but
Mhm.
it's really falls on his shoulders that this is as successful as we both think it has been,
Mhm.
and will continue to be. And because of that, I have a lot of respect for that guy. A lot of
Mhm.
respect.
So you've talked a little bit about releasing a 7-year bottled and bond, which is abnormal, right? For a brand to kind of come out there, usually it's going to be 4 years if they even do a bottled and bond, right? You're trying to get as much cash as you possibly can as quickly, sticking to the $10 per year. These are all, these are one side of the kind of research and development of a product, right? When you're going to put it out, how you're going to go to market. What was it like? What is the process to build the flavors that you have? Because you have a handful of bourbon, you have a couple of offerings that are out there. There's a rye, there's a bourbon, and then there's an LE um, series, right? So
Mhm.
do you develop the flavor profiles? Do you work with Graham? Did he have his ideas on what he wanted to be? Because his name's on the bottle, you're doing a lot of work. There's got to be just like a synergy in the middle here.
Oh yeah, that's exactly the entire business is synergetic, because I mean, he's an actor first and foremost. So he acts. I do whiskey, he acts. But the
Mhm.
only thing is I don't act. So
Yeah.
I'm just doing this. And Graham is doing both, which is super, I mean, super impressive considering how busy he is. But 95% of things are just, because I founded the company with him, I want this to succeed just as much as he does. So I take the initiative to push this forward, more so on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. But when it comes to those super important decisions, especially when we are creating a new SKU, Graham is heavily involved. So essentially, I'll come up with an idea for what we want to do. For example, the Legacy series.
Mhm.
Um, I knew that we had the ability to do something finishing Scotch barrels, and I wanted to move forward with that as our first LE of the Legacy series. And I told Graham, like, listen, this is what I want to do, man. Like, these things I don't do. I don't move forward with this without your blessing. So if you want to do this, set me loose. If not, then we'll figure something else out. And he goes, yeah, just, as he always does, hey, let's do it and let's do it hard. Like,
Mhm.
all right, cool. So we go out and I basically, with the help of some of my team as well, specifically Ivy, who's our COO, um, go kind of formulate how we want it to taste, how we want it to present, how we want it to look and be perceived by the public as. And that's where a lot of the blending aspects come in and the selections, and that's where my, I would say, expertise comes to play. Not to say I'm an expert, but um my experience in the whiskey field where I can
Mhm.
you know uh pick out exactly what I want. And we have help as well. There's people that help us silently in the background that ensure that this whiskey is going to be top notch.
Mhm.
And again, it's through the podcasting relationships that I even have that ability to do that. And they just do it because they're my friends.
Mhm.
So you know, when we make the final decision, obviously it's Graham's choice. But I tell him, "This is what I really like.
Mhm.
This is what I blended," or, "This is what," like, for example, for the Keeper Batch 1, "This is kind of what I think is gonna be good," because we didn't blend that. That was just a specific lot of barrels from Green River Distillery,
Mhm.
and, he'll 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 agree. At
Mhm.
least we're 3 for 3. So, I mean, I'm currently working on something else right now, uh that hopefully will get released this year, hopefully. Um, but we'll see if it'll be 4 for 4 after that because I basically already have it done for the most part.
So, as you're building out an idea of what you want to do you start with here's what's available to us, what's something interesting we could do? Or is it you're chasing a flavor profile or a mouthfeel? Because I've talked to a handful of different blenders, the Dixon Deadmans of the world and some smaller brands where they blend together and some folks from Rare Character or wherever else. And they all have a kind of a different approach. What's your approach to building it out?
Definitely flavor profile
Mhm.
and what will be, again, what's the happy medium between the whiskey connoisseur and
Mhm.
the novice.
Mhm.
So, Graham will sell bottle number 1 a lot of the times because he's Graham.
Yeah.
But it's up to both of us, but specifically me to make sure that we sell bottles 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's where we wanna curtail to someone like you, John, where it's like someone that knows whiskey and someone that's gonna respect, um, a brand that is trying to do what we're trying to do. And, because, we don't have as much inventory, like, I don't have, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of barrels that we own that I can just pick from. Otherwise, that would be it. We would go and figure out through our aged inventory what works and what doesn't work. But for right now, we decide, okay, here's an idea. How can we do it?
Mhm.
Go get samples of different things and start the process, do some at home blending, very simple stuff, and then figure something out. It's always something just hits. It,
Mhm.
it could be random. It could be sitting here in my apartment on a random Tuesday night, and I just do something quickly while I'm watching a YouTube video or something. It's like, oh, that's good. Mark that down. Get back to that. Or I do. I do several kind of like blocked off times where it's like, okay, this is the time
Mhm.
to kind of work on what we're going to do next. Because if I don't set that time, there's a million other things to do. But whiskey is what makes us money, so we kind of have to prioritize that. Um, and it's there's always things that you wish you did different, and things that different strategies you wish you implemented. But for the most part, it's how do we want this to taste?
Mhm.
And then from there, what's the happy medium? What's going to appease the Johns of the world, and what's going to appease the Joe Schmoes of the world that maybe are just buying this because they're a fan of Graham, or they just see it on the shelf and it's they're or maybe they're just getting into whiskey.
Right.
And what's the happy medium there? And that is much, much, much easier said than done.
Yeah, the whiskey nerds won't pay your bills, right? And it's very very simple because we're all chasing, the 400 different releases that happen, every single month, right? We're gonna try this one and try this one and try this one, and so we're buying one bottle. It's the building a continuous fan base that gets you your pull through, that gets your second, your third, exactly what you said, right? Uh, us nerds like to think we have far more impact on the market than anything else, but Buffalo Trace doesn't make much off the nerds. It makes a whole lot off of a guy that just goes and pulls one off the shelf.
Well, maybe not directly, but indirectly,
Mhm.
absolutely, because people will listen to this podcast, or people will
Right.
listen to my podcast, or any
Yeah.
podcast that I'm on or that Graham's on, and they'll go, I'm going to check this out now.
Mhm.
And it's because of the platforms of this and the whiskey
Right.
nerds that go onto Facebook groups and talk about it, or, Instagram posts, or
Mhm.
Twitter, and spread the gospel. That is where it hits the hardest. And so, yeah, maybe it's not going to be the whiskey nerds that are going out and picking up a bottle every single week, maybe, but they damn sure are moving the needle. And
Yeah.
that's for sure. And
But
that's kind of the industry that I come from, so I know that firsthand.
yeah, and that's a fair statement because at the end of the day, people that are just getting into whiskey will reach out to people that have been in it for a while and say, "Hey, you got any recommendations?" Or they listen to a podcast, or they, Bourbon Pursuit, or the 400 other whiskey podcasts that exist. They're just looking for some direction because, walking up to a whiskey aisle, not knowing what you're looking for is a daunting thing, right? It's like the first time I ever had to go buy like deodorant on my own as a kid. I was like,
Mhm.
what the hell is all of this, right? There's literally 500 different deodorants, right?
Yeah.
Now that's a simpler purchase because it's cheap, but when you're trying to face that down, you look for some voice of reason, and so we can become mini ambassadors, right? We're the ones that are saying, oh, don't be scared that this is a celebrity brand because that has had a connotation historically. I think there's several people that are breaking that
Oh, yeah.
in very unique ways, but
I think
5 years ago,
most
7 years ago,
I think most brands, most celebrity brands now are super high
mhm,
quality, to be completely honest.
yeah,
I can't, I understand that the stigma was a thing.
hmm,
Um, but I struggle to even think of a brand that really encompasses that now, if any. And I'm just talking about specifically whiskey because I don't know tequila or wine as much as
right,
I know whiskey. But I mean, we look up to like Brothers Bond,
yeah,
Heaven's Door, Whiskey Gypsy.
hmm,
There's so many more that I know I'm forgetting. Um, we look up to brands like that,
yeah,
that do it the right way. I mean, Brothers Bond is the most followed alcohol brand in the world, I think.
hmm,
um, Heaven's Door makes incredible whiskey. Whiskey Gypsy, they just sent me something like a month ago, or maybe 2 months ago. I think it was like a peach finish or something along those lines. Incredible. I'm like looking at their press release. I'm like, oh, this is a good way to do it. And I'm taking
hmm,
I'm taking some I
yeah,
take inspiration from everybody, but people that are also in the celebrity space.
yeah,
Yes, the stigma is true to the casual drinker and even to the whiskey nerd alike, but
mhm,
I think that it's slowly dissipating. I think brands like McTavish Spirits,
mhm,
brands like Brothers Bonds, really, it's our goal to create the highest quality, not just whiskey, but brand that we possibly can.
yeah,
Um, and I think people like yourself, John, like look at that, and I hope respect it.
yeah,
That's the goal. Like whether, you know, I'm always confident we're gonna have good whiskey.
mhm,
Um, but there's so much more to building a brand than just the tangible product. It's the majority of it. That whiskey is
Yeah.
the majority of it, because if we had bad whiskey, it does none of this matters, I
Mhm.
think, in the long run. But building that authenticity is a word I've been saying a lot recently. That is the goal with us, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of other celebrity brands do that very well these days.
Yeah, and I think it comes from the people that are entering the whiskey market space as a celebrity are whiskey fans to begin with, right? Where 10 years ago it was, I'm going to slap my name on this so I can make a few more dollars, right? 15,
Mhm.
20, whatever. I've got a John Wayne bourbon over here that is just super not great. And I can tell you where it was made a little
Yeah,
later on. Um, it's super not great.
I think I know where it was made. I'm pretty sure I
You
do.
know exactly where it was made.
Mhm,
They don't technically exist anymore, but
mhm.
it wasn't great whiskey, but it was just putting a name on it because I knew it would sell through to certain levels of fans. And specifically, Whiskey Gypsy is a really really good example because I've had Ari on before and talked about that particular brand, and it's very very intentional. And intentionality and authenticity go hand in hand, right? It's like we're not just throwing whiskey on the shelf to sell it. We're trying to craft a meaningful and good product that
Yeah.
just so happens to have a celebrity affiliated with it. Like they're not leading with, you know, they're not leading with the celebrity portion of it. They're leading with the quality and saying, "Hey, now I am a famous person who also supports this
That's
thing." So,
exactly kind of, and Graham will be the first. This isn't just
mhm,
me saying it. This is also what Graham says very often as well. Is we don't want when we started McTavish Spirits, it wasn't even going to be called McTavish.
mhm,
Graham wanted to be kind of in the background as a spokesperson, more or less. We ended up going with McTavish because it's a great name. I mean,
yeah,
it's I'm so happy we chose McTavish Spirits because it's I think it plays into it. Not only is it a great name, but it plays into the celebrity aspect
mhm,
just enough. But we want McTavish Spirits to be known not as Graham McTavish's whiskey brand, but a brand that's so good that Graham McTavish wants to put his name on the bottle. And
mhm,
I say that, Graham says that. That's nothing against the celebrity aspect, of
right,
which Graham hates that word, by the way,
yeah,
hates the word celebrity. But that's what I mean when it's kind of like, what is the goal here? Do we want
mhm,
to do something that, we're going to be, we're building to sell, we're building for legacy? And Graham, without a moment of hesitation, said, I want to build this to be something that my kids are proud of, that I
mhm,
can maybe pass down even. We've talked about, like, if we get the means to do it, like potentially doing a distillery, or
mhm,
I just was just thinking this week how cool it'd be to have like a legit tasting room somewhere where we
mhm,
can store a bunch of our barrels, have the bottling, like kind of like, again, taking inspiration from someone like Pursuit Spirits.
yeah,
Blackwood does it. They don't do
yeah,
it as, it's not as showy as Pursuit Spirits,
yeah,
but Guinness over there, Guinness McFadden, very good friend of mine,
mhm,
has a great operation in Versailles, and it's very, um, very much up my alley. I was just there a month ago when I was in Kentucky visiting him and Zach at
mhm,
Blackwood Distillery. But you know, that's kind of what we want to do. Not Graham McTavish's brand, a brand that's so damn good that
mhm,
Graham not only wants to promote the brand, but put his dang name on the bottle.
right,
Yeah, because
right,
it's
and
not called Gilbert, it's not called
right,
Connors, it's McTavish. So that's kind of, there has to be some type of um confidence in the brand to do that, especially on Graham's part. And I just feel like, there's a lot that comes with that,
mhm.
basically.
Yeah, and McTavish is a hell of a name, right? It wouldn't be just a great Scotch whiskey name, right? If you're looking for a name for a Scotch whiskey, it would work great, right? And we've talked a little bit about it, but we probably should talk about the releases that you guys have, right? Because you sent some stuff over. I've had the opportunity to taste through it a couple of times, and my thing is I usually go through it 3 times before I kind of publish my tasting notes on it because it could be like I had Taco Bell for lunch today, so my palate's real jacked, right?
Mm.
Or my
That's
kid's got a cold and
a
sneezed in my
dangerous
mouth and I'm sick.
lunch, John. That's a dangerous lunch. The last time I had Taco Bell, I was actually, so when I went to Kentucky about a month ago, I drove there
Oh wow,
from Rhode Island. I live in Rhode Island, so I
yeah,
drove there 14 hours, and I
Mm-hmm.
stay in West Virginia. So like when I go there, it's a little bit further than halfway to get
Mm-hmm.
there, and then a little bit closer than halfway on the way back home. I love driving there. I love driving because I like to think. It gives me time to like
Mm-hmm.
listen to my podcast and
Yep.
think and game plan and all these things. And it's a little bit cheaper as well.
Yep.
I have a lease and it's new, so I can worry about the miles in 3 years. I don't got to worry about it right now. That's the way
Yep.
that's the way I look at it. Anyways, I remember when I was driving back home from Kentucky, it was uh, pouring rain and it was pitch black. I think I had left Liquor Barn because I did an event out there at
Mm-hmm.
Liquor Barn in Hamburg. The event ended at 5. I ended up talking to John, who's the GM of the store, till 6. And then I was like, dang, I gotta go because I got about a 4.5 hour drive and
Mm-hmm.
it's looking pretty dark out in terms of clouds, like rain clouds. So
Yeah.
it started downpouring this night, and I'm driving through the Appalachian Mountains. It's pitch black on each side. It's dumping rain down, and I'm like, "Is there could be a massive mountain right next to me, on the right hand side, or it could be a valley that falls down 1,000 feet. I don't know. I can't see
Mm-hmm.
it. Got to keep my eyes on the road. Thankfully, I remembered my glasses because
Mm-hmm.
without that, I definitely would have crashed.
Mm-hmm.
But I was so hungry at the end end of the drive. It's about 10:30 in the evening, and I was just like, what do I want to get? Like, what's the move?
Fourth
Googled
meal.
the hotel. Taco Bell was right there. I'm like, I
Yep.
haven't had Taco Bell in ages. Got the Taco Bell, got some of those Doritos tacos, and
Mm-hmm.
the nacho fries that they do now. Didn't know
Yeah.
that was a thing. Absolutely. I mean, didn't get a lot of food. Was definitely more expensive than McDonald's,
Mm-hmm.
which is my typical fast food, and housed it at like 10:45 at
Oof.
night, and yeah, did not feel good.
You
Did
didn't
not
sleep
feel good
much.
the next
You
day.
didn't get good quality sleep that night.
No, 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 I slept like a rock, but I
Oh.
wanted to get up early because I had an 8-hour drive home, so
Mm.
I was still, like I didn't, like I felt like I slept good until I started driving. I was like, "Oh, I'm still really tired." So what did
Mhm.
I do? Naturally got McDonald's breakfast, of course. Had to even it out.
Right.
Sorry for that tangent, but when you say Taco Bell for lunch,
No,
I'm
no,
like,
no.
"Damn."
It's a good call out, yeah. But, so you've got a couple of releases that you sent over. I don't know which one you wanna talk about first. You've got the Legacy, you've got the War Chief. Where we wanna go?
Oh, we sent over both. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. I thought I just
I
sent over
assume so.
one.
I got one that has a little, "For Hope, for Honor" label on it, and one that has,
Oh,
um, "Drams of America, a Scotsman."
Scotsman Dream of America. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Oh, shout out Ivy. I thought she was just sending over the War Chief. She's the one that sent that to you. So shout out her. Yeah, whatever you want, man. I mean, I've got the War Chief right here. I don't have the Legacy in front of me, so I'll take a little sip of the War Chief with you. But um, yeah, why don't we start with the War Chief, go
Yeah.
into that, and then we'll end with the Legacy, and because it's drastically different.
Yeah. No, in a great way, but yeah, so tell me about kind of the ethos and the plan for War Chief.
Yeah, I'll pour some into
Yep.
my Glencairn as I'm doing this. Um, the War Chief, what it is, I'll give you the specs. It's a 7-year bottled and bond bourbon. Um, that comes from MGP. We're very, very open and honest about it. If you look at our bottle, which was, I think, one of the better bottles in whiskey,
Mhm.
I'm very biased, but our designer Emma Quinn who's an old friend of Graham's who lives in Edinburgh,
Mhm.
helped us with the design, and we were really like, I mean, we were nowhere before she came along, and then she just kind of sent us a draft, and it was very close to this, and we're like, oh my god, like you're saving us right now. Um, she came out with the signet of a Scotsman's Dream of America, and that is a
Mhm.
fusion of the can't really see it, the American eagle with the Scottish lion
Mhm.
to represent our shared heritage of American bourbon and Scotch whiskey, but also Graham's a Scotsman through and through who
Mhm.
came over to America trying to get into Hollywood, landed Rambo 2008, and hasn't looked back since.
Mhm.
So it's a 75% corn, 21% rye, 4% malted barley mash bill from MGP. Very, very popular mash bill from MGP. Very, I mean, just really solid whiskey. And we were kind of like going through sampling things, blending things, and figuring out what exactly do we want to do with our first release. And we had sampled this at barrel proof, and we're like, "Oh, this is good." And then we figured out it was 7 years because we're not doing everything blind, but we had a lot of stuff in front of us. This was like the third time we were doing R&D together. And we were started thinking like, "Okay, this is 7 years old. I think we proofed it down to like around 110 or something, like 105." And then it was someone came up with the idea of, "Has anyone ever done a bottle and bond, like a celebrity brand? Because it'd be cool to be the first." And
Mhm.
we Googled it, we couldn't find anything. So we're
Mhm.
like, "Okay, let's proof this down to 100." Tried it, and Graham was the one who was like, because he always says it's Christmas in a glass.
Mhm.
And he's like, "I'm just getting Christmas. I'm getting like fruit pie, dark fruit, stuff like that." And I was like, "You know what, Graham, you're absolutely right." So once we kind of had that discussion, it was like, this is gonna be it. And it was kind of just sitting right in front of us because we were blending things. We were like, we were starting from literal scratch, and then ended up being just a very popular mash bill from a very popular distillery, proof down to 100 proof to comply with bottle and bond standards. So that's what the war chief is. Graham played a character called Dougal Mackenzie in Outlander called the war chief, which is where the name comes from. And good battle pop. I will pour some out with you.
Yeah. Yeah, the first time I went through this, when I stuck my nose in the glass, it gave me it's like when you have a cake that has a good like sugar coating icing to it, where it kind of gets burnt in the corners, like that little like burnt crispy sugary thing
Yeah.
where the glaze is and on that's exactly
Mhm.
what it was. And then it hit like with some just dark sweetness on the nose, and um it was what you want to smell in a 7 year that you don't always get to smell in a 7 year. 7 year always feels like it's like a pivotal year for me. There's some that smell younger and some that smell older, and this feels like it goes to an older nose than the year. That makes
Right.
sense.
I know. I think the guys over at Bourbon Life podcast, who are good friends of mine, suggested that this has a very dusty
Hmm.
aspect to it, which obviously, as whiskey guys, we know that that's a huge compliment.
Yeah.
Saying anything smells and or tastes like a dusty bourbon is a huge is like,
Hmm.
man, that's like a gold star. So
Right.
I would agree with you. I do think it kind of hits above its age, maybe a bit, especially on the nose. Not so much on the palate, but
Right.
the nose. If you really dive into it, yeah, it's if you look past that, the initial sweetness of the corn, high corn mash bill, um, strong vanillas on there, a lot of like oak sweetness, pulled from the barrel from sitting there in there for 7 years. I think you get a little bit of like a nice mustiness, and
Mhm.
I attribute a lot, most if not all of the notes to the high corn mash bill. I don't get a
Mhm.
whole lot of the rye on it. I get a
Yeah.
little bit of cinnamon, maybe a tad bit of leather. Um, but this is a corn nose for sure. Like this is a
Mhm.
straight up corn nose.
Yeah, I didn't pick the cinnamon up on until the finish. Both of the times I went through it, I didn't get it initially with the palate or the nose, but I got definitely like some brown sugar slash burnt sugar notes in a good way, not like you burn it to the pan looking like black tar heroin or something. But I don't want to say pleasantly surprised because it sounds like you're going in like, oh, this is gonna smell terrible, but it was a good opening. The day that I drank it, it was like the first thing that I had that day.
Good, good. And whenever I drink whiskey, first sip for me always just goes down.
Mhm.
I don't try to mess around with it. And I know you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to tell you anyways. That's when me and Graham do a tasting, and people always ask, "How do you taste whiskey?" Not that
Mhm.
I'm an expert, but I say, "Well, this is how I do it." And I've
Yeah.
tasted, just like you, hundreds of whiskeys, especially alive on the air on podcasting.
Mhm.
I don't know how many hundreds of episodes of podcasts I've done. The first sip always just goes down.
Mhm.
Because even now, it never sits with me as much as it's sitting with me right now. But I also haven't drank in a few days, so
Mhm.
it's like you just gotta kind of lubricate the mechanics
Right.
first, and then you can start swishing it and doing all that fancy stuff.
It's like a cold start on a diesel engine, right? The first one's gonna
Exactly.
be real rough. I spent a weekend in Denver with a bunch of whiskey nerds, so my I'm not days away from drinking. I'm like days away from not needing to drink for a while. It's time to
Yeah.
take a break. But when I lean into this, from a palate standpoint, it gives me some good citrus, right? I get some orange or some burnt orange peel, maybe, like on a cocktail. Whenever somebody's making something, there's some sort of a charring, burnt, smoky thing that happens for me on this, whether it be in the finish or in the palate. Both of the times that I've had it so far, and I actually had a little bit of it before we got on the podcast, so that way I did have the initial one down the hatch before we ever
There you
even
go.
began, was ready to
There
go.
you go. Smart man. Yeah, it's for me. And I know we're nearing the time you said you had to hard stop at. I'm aware of that. So if you
No, we're good.
whatever you want to do, you can rush me through, whatever. But for me, this 21% rye mash bill, or the 21% rye in this mash bill is what I meant to say, really lends itself to the mid back palate, and that's what that's what sold me on this was.
Yeah.
It's very corn heavy on the nose and on the front of the palate. I don't necessarily get the orange that you're saying, although I can kind of see where you're coming from. Uh, but on the mid to back is where that really, really nice cinnamon, dark fruit, almost chocolatey aspect comes out. And I think that is a testament to the quality of the whiskey of the MGP distillate, but also taking that 7-year and just bringing it down to 100 proof. I think this is honestly at this mash bill where maybe even to where it comes down to where it's aged in the warehouse and everything, bring it down to 100 proof. I think this is just a sweet spot for this specific lot that we choose from for McTavish. I really think it's just like the honey barrels, more or less, because I think that this is no knock to any other 7-year whiskey out there. I love almost all of them, but I just feel like this is much more nuanced than I typically get with others. Now, again, I'm biased, but I think that that's why we ended up choosing this, because of that really, really nice rye influence, especially on the back of the palate, and on the finish. You can't call it a Kentucky hug because it's not Kentucky bourbon, but it's similar. It sticks with you,
Yeah.
and it's that nice rye, Christmassy, dark fruit, cinnamon, almost like a dark cherry Coke.
Yeah. So I've got dark cherry and stewed cherry on both of my taste through notes. One was on the palate, one was on the finish. Cinnamon was there, and it's sweet, but in a darker way, which lends itself to more like a wine sweetness. So it's not like overly sweet. It just it felt full, and it stuck around for so long. And I was kind of, that I wanted to hear your thoughts on it, but I kind of felt the same way, where the fact that it has that rye content helps it kind of hang around longer than maybe it would have otherwise. And that's one of my, sort of pet peeves when it comes to whiskey, is like, if it doesn't stick with me for a while, there are some of those like, oh, it just makes you want to go back and drink another one. That's a really easy way to say it had a really, really short finish. This doesn't have a short finish. It's not like it doesn't stick around for hours, and it's not like the Spinal Tap where you just pluck a note and you go away, have a bite, and come back and it's still going.
Yeah,
it's not like that, but it is an appropriate good length where you feel like you're having an experience as opposed to drinking.
Agreed, and that's very nice. I appreciate that. It means a lot coming from you. Thank you very much.
Cool. Yeah, and we've got a few minutes. I really, really want to talk about the legacy for sure, right? Because there's some interesting stuff in that. So, kind of give me the rundown on the legacy real quick.
I'll give you the cliff notes. More or less, we wanted to do something to honor the Scottish heritage, and I always knew I wanted to replicate something that was kind of similar to what the BTAC is, or the what the Parker's Heritage, stuff like that. There's a really high quality annual release that we could, more or less have fun with, experiment with different finishes or different types of whiskey or whatever it may be. And that's where Legacy Series 1 was born, for Hope and Honor, which is the name of Graham's 2 daughters, Hope and Honor. And essentially what Legacy Series is, it's a blend of 3 different barrels. So I took 1 6-year barrel and 2 7-year barrels of the same distillate that is the War Chief 21% rye for MGP. And each of those barrels, and I don't know, because I know you're going to ask me this, I don't know how long each barrel was finished for, because we finished to taste. So I chose it based on taste. And but they were each finished for different amounts of time in a peated Scotch cask, and I don't know the distillery either. I was
Yep.
told some of the staves could have been Ardbeg, but I can't say that for certain, which is why I don't really like publicly say
Mhm.
that. But I know they're Isla Scotch barrels, and more or less, we just kind of once I knew the base distillate is when we kind of started experimenting with the different levels of peat influence on each barrel. So this was a lot of intricacy that went into this,
Mhm.
and the initial run of samples that I provided Graham as to like, all right, here's what we're gonna pick from. Give me your thoughts. He gave me his thoughts, and then we went back and kind of switched, tweaked some very minor things around. And then basically I had like, here you go, Graham. I think I gave him 4 samples, and it kind of went from least amount of peat influence to most amount of peat influence.
Mhm.
And God bless Ivy. I love her to death, but she's not a peated Scotch girl. So she was like, I vote for the least amount of peat influence. And then
Mhm.
I'm looking at Graham, and we were doing this virtually because I think he was filming Spartacus at the time. So he wasn't around. I was like, Graham, I think we got to go with the heavy peat influence. And
Mhm.
he's like, I agree with you, mate. I think we got to do it because we wanted it to be a statement, and
Mhm.
it was just enough peat where it wasn't punching you in the mouth,
Yep.
but it was definitely making itself known. I call it the perfect bourbon to bridge the gap between a true American bourbon and a true, single malt uh, Scotch whiskey
Mhm.
coming from the region of Isla. And um, if I had to, the th- the 3 releases we've done, because we also did a batch 1 rye whiskey that is now sold out. Um, I love each of them. The rye whiskey was a super fun one to do. I felt very lucky we fell on those barrels at the time we did. The War Chief is my baby. I
Mhm.
mean, it's I look at the bottle and it makes me happy. But I think the Legacy Series 1 is my favorite. If I had to choose one,
Mhm.
I think it's my favorite. I hope you agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I'm not. I'm going to start from a couple places. So I'm not a huge Scotch guy to begin with, specifically peated Scotch. Now I've started getting into it, just as you do as a whiskey nerd, right? It's like you're going to eventually lean your way into that. But I would agree wholeheartedly that this is a great place to introduce someone to peat on familiar territory, right? Because
Mhm.
it can be jarring. The first few times you try to drink an Octomore or an Ardbeg, you get beat up real bad. And this doesn't do that. It's a really, really subtle influence in a good way, right? It's not that it disappears or whatever, but I noted the first time, I drank through it, I didn't necessarily pick up the smoke from the peat as much as it felt like a grilled fruit of some type. But then whenever I drank the palate, I got a good like spicy baked apple kind of thing, and then it felt like a Scotch cask quietly snuck into the room and then like leaned
Yeah.
against it real hard and was like, "Here, I'm still actually here."
Yeah.
And then the second time I went through it, I sort of knew what I was getting ready to experience. Now these were a couple of days apart, and that's usually the hope is like maybe I'll have forgotten a few things, but it still kept me in the burnt sugary thing that I was getting from the War Chief, which I didn't realize because I didn't do any research on the Legacy series other than I knew it was peated.
Mhm.
It gave me the same burnt sugar notes, but there's a little apple to it, and it's like an apple pie that's been cooked over a fire, and the smoke stays with you through the finish, whether it be a tobacco smoke or a peat smoke that you happen to pick up. It's really good. It's really, really good, and I think that it is probably showing a level of maturity and advancement that is great for a brand, right? Like a 7-year bottled and bond whiskey, especially if you have good distillate, is, and I don't want to say simple, but it is easier to do than finishing in a peated Scotch cask and then blending it to taste for people to try, right? That has so many ways it can go wrong. It shows a degree of artistry. So yes, I agree that this is far more interesting in a good way to try.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that was a nice way of saying I don't like scotch, so I don't love
No,
this, but I
no, no,
appreciate.
no, no, no. I
I'm
do.
I'm
I do like
I'm
this. Like,
kidding. I'm kidding. I'm
yeah.
kidding.
To be very, very clear, because I have quite a bit of peated Scotch sitting over here in little sample bottles that some friends have shared with me,
Yeah.
and this doesn't play in the same world for that, and so it is a good entry place for
Yeah.
someone. I've got a friend who absolutely hates peat, and he may get a little bit of this sent to him in the
Mhm.
mail. Actually, not in the mail. That would be against the law. That is not okay. I am going to hand deliver it to him, right? Because that's what
Yes,
we
of
do here.
course.
So we've talked about the things that you have done. Are there any things that you have planned coming up in the future that you are able to talk about yet?
Uh, Not necessarily in exact detail, but there are definitely things that we have planned
Mhm,
as of right now, and things move slow in the whiskey game. It doesn't necessarily go exactly at the speed that I want it to go. Sometimes I have all these grand ideas, but it's like, oh, we got to have like money to do that. So
mhm,
I have a plan, and I know exactly what I want to do, and I know what Graham wants to do as well.
mhm,
And we have a very detailed, route to market with a few different, excuse me, a few different SKUs that
mhm,
we want to release. Both, that will be, batched product or even a new addition to the core portfolio, which right now includes the War Chief and the Keeper.
mhm,
Legacy Series 1 is a different thing. I'm hoping we can get to Legacy Series 2 this year. We have some ideas of how we want to do that. Um, but that's nothing set in stone yet with that,
mhm,
which we got to get a move on. It's almost June and these things take time, but um, there's definitely a lot of cool things that we're going to release. 'Cause again, we're looking at this in the long term.
mhm,
So it's not just releasing a few things, doing that. Like we want to build. I look at brands like Penelope. I look at brands like Smoke Wagon, and I look at brands like Pursuit, and how concise and easy to follow their product lines are. That's what I want to do with McTavish. I want all the bottles to look fairly similar. I
mhm,
want them to present similar, but I want there to be different options for different levels of drinkers. And that is kind of what I'm focused on right now as we build the brand, as we work to potentially, expand distribution. Slowly but surely. Again, I don't want to do that too quickly either. I think
yeah,
that is what kills a lot of brands is trying to get into 30, 40, 50 states right off the bat. I mean, it's really just a handful of us doing this. So we don't even have the manpower to do that. But anyways, that's what I want to do. We've got some traveling coming up. We're going to the Alaska Highland Games at the end of June, and then we have the main Highland Games in August, which are also the Men's World Championship Games that
mhm,
we're going to be the presenting official bourbon for as well. So we'll be doing that this summer, and then we'll see what happens after that, man. But um, we're just committed. We just want to make good whiskey and do the right thing. So
yeah,
we're always looking for ideas. I know I'll be traveling a little bit in the summertime to various places, various markets.
mhm.
I think I have a few events set up in Wisconsin already for the end of July. But other than that, just doing the damn thing.
And doing it well, I'll say, from the things that I've seen and things that I've tasted. Now, if somebody wants to keep up with what's going on, is there a newsletter? Is it the website? Is it a Facebook page? Is it Instagram? Like where do they need to be looking to say, where the hell's Connor going next? What's happening with McTavish?
Yeah, no, all of the above. So it's really integral to follow McTavish Spirits on everything we do: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and then if you go to our website mctavishspirits.com, we do have a newsletter that we try to send out at least
Mhm,
fairly often. You can sign up for that newsletter, and we'll send you something. Especially if we're gonna release something new or do something big, those are the first people that know.
mhm,
Um, you want to follow Graham because Graham does a lot of good posting with McTavish Spirits as well. And then my info is Connor underscore whiskey on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok as well. I've been posting a lot more on TikTok too. Um, but Instagram is where I'll do a little behind the scenes of McTavish Spirits, and then my podcast, Who Gives a Dram. You can subscribe there on YouTube, and I'm doing a lot more behind the scenes content,
mhm,
including the podcasting, kind of peeling the onion back a little bit and letting people kind of live vicariously through me as to what it's like as a 28-year-old running a, nationally or internationally recognized whiskey brand. I'm going to do behind the scenes videos. I have a lot of plans for that channel as well. And again, that's Who Gives a Dram on YouTube. Dram, like DRAM. And then we have the War Chief available for sale on our website for $74.99. Just go to McTavishSpirits.com, go to shop, click on the War Chief, and it'll ship to 46 states in this country. And Legacy Series 1, I believe there's a few dozen bottles left on Sealbox. We partnered with Sealbox to do a limited edition secondary drop online of Legacy Series after we sold it out on our website. So if you go to Sealbox and type in McTavish Spirits, Legacy Series 1 will come up. We're selling it for $79.99. And I think there's a few dozen bottles left there. So go check it out over there. And get a bottle before it's gone, because we're not doing it again. And once it's gone, it's gone.
So a finished 6 to 7 year old LE type bottle for $80. I don't know that you can beat that anywhere. The work that goes into that is pretty phenomenal. You're still sticking at that damn near $10 a year pricing on it. So awesome. That's always good to hear from a consumer standpoint. You've connected all of the dots on where we need to go to buy things, where we need to be watching. I'm glad to see the podcast coming back up again, because you did. Yeah, we started almost exactly the same time.
And I did appreciate that message. You sent me a message kind of like when I first announced I was doing it again. And I did appreciate that, because there's a small group of people that I've been doing this consistently for the amount of time that we've been doing it. And you're definitely one of them. And although this is our first time actually connecting in person, I feel like we've known each other for a very long time, because I've always been following your stuff, and I'm sure you've been keeping up with my stuff for, again, almost a half a decade. So it's the most beautiful part about whiskey, man. It's stuff like this. This is why I love it. This is why I do McTavish Spirits. This is why I even started doing the podcast. These connections, these friendships, the bonds, and the relationships you build with people are I mean, just incredible. So I appreciate you inviting me on here. This was great. And you now have to come on Who Gives a Dram, so we can talk about the Embellish podcast a bit, and maybe we can sip some more whiskey together.
Without a doubt. Thank you so much for giving me some time. You can't ever recreate more of it, and you're giving me so much, so I'm greatly appreciative.
My pleasure, brother.
Thanks for tuning into this episode from the EmbellishPod. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform you're consuming this on. Leave a comment if possible. Hit me up on social media on TikTok or Instagram using EmbellishPod, and give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can be found at www.embellishpod.com with all of my links, accounts, contact details, and more. Thanks for stopping by.